Hey everyone, welcome back to Hoopers Nation, your top destination for NBA basketball content. The NBA awards are one of the most controversial topics in the NBA. Not only have past winners fueled strong discussions among the NBA fanbase, but also the criteria and methods that are used to select the winners of the yearly awards. In this video, we'll take a deep look at everything that's wrong with the NBA award system and the different awards given out each year, as well as possible solutions to these problems. But before we do, please make sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on Hoopers Nation post notifications for more NBA content. So, let's get right to the middle of it all, the most valuable player race. The league MVP is one of, if not the most controversial and polemic award given out every single season. But what exactly is so difficult to understand about the MVP? Maybe that's where we should start, because it's not exactly clear what an MVP means. Let's face it, the league MVP rarely ever goes to the true most valuable player. Bradley Beal could very well be this year's MVP award winner if the award really went to the most valuable player of a team, because there's a good chance the Wizards would only have 1 or 2 wins, perhaps even 0, if it wasn't for Beal playing out of his mind. But no matter how good he plays, it won't help Beal's MVP case because the Wizards are likely to have a losing season. So then is the MVP the best player on the league's best team? This definition is closer to what we actually end up getting as a winner, but it's also not consistent enough. You only have to go back a couple of seasons when Russell Westbrook won the 2017 MVP award, despite his Thunder only being a 6th seed and OKC having a very forgettable performance in the first round of the NBA playoffs. So is the MVP better defined as the guy with the best stats? Not always, as was the case in 2015 with Steph Curry. Other players like LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and James Harden arguably had better stat lines than him, and Curry wasn't even in the top 5 for points or assists per game. The reality is that the aforementioned criteria are all used to evaluate MVP candidates. The problem is that there's a lot of inconsistencies with the weight each criteria has each year. Because it sounds a bit weird that in 2016, Steph Curry won his 2nd MVP award as the best player on the best team in the league, while the very next season, Russell Westbrook won the league MVP just purely off the amazing stats he was able to put up. These inconsistencies are what prompted many of the debates on wrong MVP winners. Examples of these are Derrick Rose winning in 2011 over LeBron James, or Steve Nash winning his 2nd MVP over Kobe Bryant. But what if we told you that criteria inconsistency wasn't the worst part about the league MVP? The actual worst part about the MVP award is that it only accounts for regular season performance. How embarrassing must it have been for Giannis Antetokounmpo to be announced as the 2020 MVP, which was his 2nd MVP award in as many years, just days after getting exposed by the Miami Heat in the 2nd round of the NBA playoffs last year. Some people may think that the answer to that is returning to the old tradition of announcing the league MVP and the rest of the awards at the beginning of the playoffs. At the end of the day, it's also a more meaningful experience for a player to be presented with his award trophy in front of his home crowd. But perhaps the best alternative is just extending the MVP eligibility period to after the NBA playoffs. The NBA awards show may be a great concept to attract viewers and make a whole red carpet even out of, but it misses the entire point of the awards if they're handed out 2 months later after votes were casted. How meaningful is Giannis' MVP from last season really, considering he choked to a team that only had 1 player who barely made the All-NBA 3rd team? Perhaps the trophy would have gone to someone different. This same logic could be applied to a player like Michael Jordan back in the 90s, when he was beat to the MVP award by players like Charles Barkley or Karl Malone, yet Jordan still outperformed them in the playoffs. Voter fatigue is something that affected Jordan back in the day, as well as something LeBron James has fell victim to in modern times. So it's possible the MVP award hasn't gone to the best player in the NBA more often than not. We've talked a lot about the MVP up to this point, so let's have some quick discussions about the rest of the awards for a second. So what exactly makes up the most improved player? We could go back in history and point to the inconsistencies with the MIP criteria just as we did with the MVP, but it's pointless. What's fair to ask is whether this award should exclusively be left for genuine surprises. For instance, last year was Brandon Ingram, a former number 2 overall pick who most people thought would eventually become a really good player in the NBA anyway. But is he really a more deserving winner than somebody like fellow MIP finalist Bam Adebayo, who's a former 14th pick in the NBA draft and nobody saw having that good of a season, and one in which he helped lead an underdog Miami Heat to the NBA Finals? These are tough questions worth asking, especially when you consider that a guy like Ingram put up good numbers on a bad team, while Bam ended up making the all-defensive second team and making a surprise NBA Finals appearance. The most improved player race this season will be an absolute jungle, with players like Julius Randle, Jeremy Grant, Malcolm Brogdon, Colin Sexton, and Christian Wood all having really good cases. But who should have the edge? Somebody like Grant, who moved to a bad team before breaking out? A guy like Sexton, who's turned the Cavaliers into a competitive basketball franchise after being miserable since LeBron James left? Or a former Rookie of the Year like Malcolm Brogdon, who was already good but took his stats to another level this year? It's gonna be a really tough call. Now, moving on to the Sixth Man of the Year category, this is probably the most consistent award in terms of criteria. It's handed out to a guy who provided some strong scoring off the bench. But what about a guy like Marcus Smart, who came off the bench for most of the games early in his career, providing excellent defense and hustle? He's never been a scorer, but he was always one of the most impactful players to come off the bench a couple of years ago, yet never got Sixth Man of the Year considerations. It may sound like we're reaching here, but just think about it for a second. Now, what's exactly a Coach of the Year? The criteria for this award is also all over the place. As sometimes it's given to the best head coach on the best team, well, sometimes it's given to a coach who helped a lesser team overachieve. But it's absolutely criminal that a guy like Eric Spoelstra hasn't won a single Coach of the Year award despite being one of the best in the league for over a decade. Even Greg Popovich's 3 Coach of the Year awards may be too few considering how good he really is. Doc Rivers is revered as a great coach nowadays, but how the heck did he win a Coach of the Year award when his team didn't even win in the playoffs in 2000? Now, moving on to the Defensive Player of the Year award, it's never been harder to vote for this award than it is nowadays. In a modern league where defensive impact can now be assessed way further than with steals and blocks, the Defensive Player of the Year race is as competitive as ever. Good switching IQ, off-ball defense, smart closeouts, and defensive awareness are all factors that must be considered, but are really hard to evaluate without watching a lot of basketball games. And we don't mean only watching national TV games, because to truly form a good criteria, you must watch at least a couple dozen games from each of the finalists. And this award isn't exempt from criteria inconsistencies throughout its history, with one of the most sound cases of wrongful NBA awards voting happening back in 2013. Marc Gasol was named the 2013 Defensive Player of the Year with 212 points and 30 first-place votes over LeBron James, who came up second with 149 points and 18 first-place votes. Yet somehow, James led all players with 25 votes for the all-defensive teams, making the all-defensive first team, while Gasol only received 5 first-place votes and ended up in the all-defensive second team. Not only that, but Tyson Chandler and Joakim Noah, 2 other centers, received more first-place votes than Gasol and also ended up on the all-defensive first team. That's absolutely baffling and mind-blowing. And to this day, we have no clue how that even happened, when the exact same pool of media members vote both for the Defensive Player of the Year and all league teams. There are many unknown factors about the media members who have a vote for the NBA awards. Currently, there's a pool of 100 independent media members who submit ballots with votes for each of the NBA's awards. Before voting season starts, teams and agents will often call those with a vote and make a case for their players, as well as sending some campaigning merchandise. There should supposedly be no conflicts of interest given media members are supposed to be independent, but you have to think some of the local reporters could be a bit too generous with their players. Or even some national reporters could be swayed in favor of the bigger stars to remain on their good side. The 2013 Defensive Player of the Year fiasco prompted the league to make votes public starting in 2014, which meant that the media's ballots would be released to the public and everybody would know who had voted for whom. This was a nice step towards transparency, but it's also put a huge burden on the reporters' backs. Not only are they subject to backlash from fans and fellow media members on social media, something that always happens after votes are made public, but this has also hurt reporters' relationships with agents and players considering how NBA awards have an impact on players' future contracts. When signing new contracts, veteran players who were named as a league MVP or any of the 3 previous seasons, or Defensive Player of the Year in the most recent season or both before it, or to an All-NBA team in the most recent season or both before it, can apply for what's popularly known as a Supermax contract. Players coming off their rookie deals who sign max extensions could also see fat increases in their payouts if they meet similar criteria. Most players feel as if their incentives shouldn't be left in the hands of people who have never played or coached at a professional level. But that's how the system currently works. Players can lose out on millions because they weren't recipients of the awards required to qualify for Supermax contracts. I have heard of this. Players telling a media member, "Well, why should I talk to you? You didn't put me on the All-NBA team or vote for me last year," said Jeff Zilgett, a veteran reporter for USA Today. I have heard of that happening. That is real, but it hasn't happened to me. This begs the question, should media members continue to have full power on NBA award winners? The short answer is yes, but the long answer is quite more complex. Since the ballots became public in 2014, the media's mostly got all the award winners correct. There may still be questions on why players get left off of all NBA teams or why they didn't win an award, but that's more a byproduct of the level of competition that our league has. Some believe the players are the ones who know their fellow players the best, and therefore they should vote on the awards. And even though this is true, we've seen what happens when players are given a say in honors like All-Star voting. There's still guys favored over others due to friendships, relationships, money implications that make things even more complicated. So players aren't the best option. Coaches could possibly be given a say in NBA awards as long as they can't vote for their own players. But let's not forget, coaches have also had relationships with many players while working for other teams in the past, given the nature of how coaching in the NBA works. So this could also lead to some biased voting. In the end, the problem isn't so much who votes for the awards. Sure, the media can always do better, but they do as good of a job as anybody else would do. The problem lies more in the systems and rules for the awards. The NBA should at least look to expand the eligibility period to include the NBA playoff performances, as well as making an attempt to have a clearer and more consistent criteria so everybody knows what to expect from each award winner. Anyway, this is what we think is wrong with the NBA award system. Did we miss any other things that must be fixed? What else would you change from the current NBA award system? Make sure to comment your thoughts down below, as well as leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.